Alright, welcome back everybody. This is going to be the first actual video of the series of the Outdrive service that I mentioned in the last video. So in this episode I'm going to show you how to drain your Outdrive oil and do a pressure test. There's a couple different ways you can do this, the pressure test that is. I'll show you what I'm going to do. It's not entirely practical for everybody. I just happened to get a small metal lathe, like a hobby type metal lathe recently that I wanted to mess around with, so I actually ended up making my own kind of adapter fitting. But what most people do is they use the fittings that come with like the fill kits that you can get at like Walmart or any boat store. That it's like the little pump that goes on top of the gear lube bottle. It comes with the fitting that screws into the Outdrive. A lot of people take that and like use a hose clamp and all that kind of stuff. So I'll show you what I did and kind of tell you what you can do. But yeah, so I got the drive up here, just screwed in a eye-bolt that's rated for like 350 pounds into this beam on my ceiling, and just use a regular old ratchet strap. These are reasonably strong. I think an Outdrive only probably weighs like 80 or 100 pounds, so it should be fine. Got it kind of wrapped around here and just kind of suspended up in the air. Reason for that is I just need to be able to get underneath to this point here for the drain, so I can get all the oil out. So yeah, got this thing up in the air. Let me get the drain plug under and I'll show you what we do to drain the oil. Be right back. Alright guys, so the first thing I want to mention here is one thing that's a little bit goofy about these Alpha drives. I think the Bravos are a little bit different the way the drain plugs are, but these Alphas, can't see it on this side, but the drain plug's right over here. Unless you have this on the boat and you can trim it kind of all the way back, and even then I think it still kind of tends to do this, but when you pull the drain plug, most of it, you'd think you put the drain plug under here, but a lot of it actually ends up sticking to the skeg and running the whole way down and dripping down here somewhere. So it's nice to have a big drain pan like this that kind of just goes underneath the whole thing, because I learned the first time I did this that it doesn't go where you think it is. So you got two plugs on these things, the Alphas. You have the top one which says vent, or oil vent, and then on the bottom you have the drain plug. Focus right there. So and I believe, just so you don't get them mixed up, I believe the one on the bottom here actually has a magnet on the end of it, which we'll see, and that basically is meant to catch any metal debris from gears or anything like that. So what I like to do is I take out the bottom one first. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, but you'll see why. So when you take out the bottom one first, you still have this top one in, which kind of, it's kind of like if you buy those big jugs of water, and you open the spout on the bottom of it, it comes out really slow, but then when you poke a hole in the top and allow air in, it helps it drain much faster. So that's essentially what you want to do here, except you want to use this to your advantage. So if you take this out first and then take out the bottom one, a lot of that oil is going to come gushing out and get all over your hand and make a mess. So if you do the bottom one first, then the top one, that'll just kind of help keep your hands a little cleaner and make less of a mess. So let me get a screwdriver here and show you how that works. One last tip here, you want to make sure you get a flathead screwdriver as big as possible to fill that slot, because these will strip out. So you want to use the biggest flathead screwdriver you got on these. Hopefully you can see what's going on here. So, alright, that popped loose. Spin it out nice and slow. Alright, now that I broke it loose, I'm going to switch to a normal screwdriver because this thing's so long I don't actually have room with the ground there to get at it at the right angle, so I'm going to go back to the smaller one here. Alright, and out we go. Now see how slow that's coming out? I like to give it a little sniff test. It smells like gear lube, a little bit of a burnt smell, but the really good news is no water. And I also don't see any, this is the magnet on the end here I was telling you about. See? You want to inspect that for metal filings. I don't see anything at all, which is really good news. A little bit here and there is okay. What you don't want to see is big pieces of metal or a lot of kind of metal build-up debris. A really small amount of almost like dust is okay. I mean, that's just normal wear and tear. But this is what you want to see, just the magnet and nothing else. So I'm going to set this aside, and then we'll take out the top plug. And make sure you do not lose this stuff, because you know how much boat parts cost. You don't want to have to order more stuff. Make sure you keep this stuff in a tray or something. I have one of these extra bins for my organizers. This is the one I use for my carburetor. I like to use it for this. A lot of people use those magnetic trays that you can get at like the auto store or Harbor Freight, but it actually doesn't work that great on a lot of boat stuff, because a lot of boat stuff is actually stainless steel and aluminum, so it doesn't stick to a magnet. So I like these trays. Alright, let me find another spot for you here. Let's see if I can't do this one one-handed, since I'm up in the air a little bit. There we go. Framing. Oh, did you hear that? You could actually hear the air getting sucked in. And see? No magnet on that one. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, so I'm going to throw this in my parts bin down here. We'll set that aside up on the desk, which is a mess as usual. And doesn't look like it's coming out any faster, but it is. So we're just going to let this drain until everything comes out, and then from there we'll go on to pressure testing. When this gets drained, I'll be right back with you guys. See you. Alright guys, well, this thing's slowly draining here. I want to show you my kind of setup I concocted here for pressure testing the drive. The main takeaway from this is it really doesn't matter how you do this, but I will tell you what you need to do. This end right here, this piece right here is actually what I made on my lathe. Just turned it out of aluminum. Don't judge me, it's the first part I've ever made on it. So basically what you need to do is on the end here is match up this thread to what the drain plug is, which in my case, well, in all your cases, this is going to be a 3/8 16 thread. It's not pipe thread. It's basically like a standard bolt thread. I think it's coarse, unified, something along those lines. 3/8 16. Now, with that being said, I threw an O-ring in here to basically ensure the seal when I thread it into the drive. And then this is not entirely necessary. I decided to put a gauge on the tester. So the finer resolution you can get, the better. I had a hard time. I really wanted to find a gauge, an 1/8 inch pipe thread that I could thread into this piece I made. I didn't start out with a piece big enough to be able to make this 1/4 inch pipe thread. So I found a gauge that was 1/8 inch NPT, but it went up to like 120 PSI. So the resolution you got down in this lower range was not very good, and I didn't trust it. So, and the point I'm making here is we only want to pressurize this drive with like 5 or 6 pounds. Any higher and you risk blowing out the seals, any lower and you might not actually get a good representation of any leakage. Basically, the point being, when this drive gets hot, the pressure may build up inside to higher than a couple of PSI. So basically, to replicate worst case operating conditions, what we want to do is shoot for like between 5 and 8 PSI. So what I did is I found a gauge that goes up to 30 PSI, so that gives me good resolution down in this lower range. I have it increment every PSI, which should be more than sufficient. That being said, so let's just kind of recap. I have this single piece that has a hole drilled the whole way through the middle, comes out the end here. 3/8 by 16 thread, O-ring, not sure if it's needed because the drain plugs don't have them, but just in case. O-ring going to a pressure gauge, it's teed off. And then on this end, what I have is basically a quick disconnect airline fitting. So what I'm going to do is hook this up to my airline, slowly raise the pressure up to what I want, and then disconnect this from the airline. And once the airline's removed from this type of fitting acts as a valve, essentially, or almost like a check valve, so it'll close. So once there's no more airline connected here, I'm just going to let this sit on the drive for a few hours, maybe probably overnight at this point. And as long as none of this stuff leaks dramatically, I should hold pressure for, and I guess in theory, all night, but that wouldn't surprise me if I have really small leaks in here. I tried to test it and I didn't see anything major, but we'll see how it goes. Now, I don't know the rule of thumb on if any leakage is okay or how long it needs to hold pressure. I'll see if I can find any info on that before I finish up the end of this video, so I can tell you kind of what to expect and what you're looking for. So again, main takeaway from this is you need to get 3/8 16 thread to an airline. Essentially, doesn't matter if you have a gauge here or somewhere, you just want to be able to have a gauge somewhere to tell you what the pressure is that you're putting into the drive. What most people do that don't have access to make something is this fitting basically will come in the kits, like I think I mentioned this earlier in the video. The gear bottle pump kits that you can buy from like auto parts stores, Walmart, whatever, that you use to actually put the gear loop back into the drive, they come with this type of threaded fitting that hooks up to a hose that goes to the gear pump. So what a lot of guys do is we'll take that fitting that comes with that, clamp the hose on, and then on the other end run it to either an air fitting or like an inflator valve for a tire, a Schrader valve I think they're called. So basically you can really do whatever you want here to get air in. You just need to basically get it to that thread. Oh, and one other thing people do a lot of times is they'll actually buy a 3/8 16 bolt, like a long bolt, and then cut the head off and drill the whole way down the center of it, and then clamp a hose on the other side. Same kind of idea. This is probably fancier than what most people need, but now that I have it, it's something I can hold on to or lend some buddies that want to test their drives. It's a little more durable and permanent, so decided to go that route. Alright, this thing's still dripping. Yep, still coming out. See what I mean here? How it's now you can see it's all running down the skeg and it doesn't drip until it gets to the bottom. So that's, again, that's why you want to have this big drain pan underneath. Alright, we'll give this some more time until it stops dripping. Alright guys, we are back with the drive. Pretty much stopped draining, so everything looked good. One thing I didn't show is actually I kind of struggled getting the drain plugs back in, and then I actually realized I don't know why I didn't notice it or think of this before, because I've taken these off before and just forgot about it, but there's actually these little rectangular kind of cross-section washers, seals that go on each of the drain plugs, top and bottom, and they were kind of stuck in the drive, so I just took one of these little picks and popped them out of there, and that made it easier to put the screws back in because they're kind of hanging up on that. So got that done. Got my pressure tester installed. I had to turn my gauge a little bit so it would fit by here. So just a couple of quick things. The pressure tester I couldn't remember until I just double checked, but it goes in the upper hole, the vent hole, not the bottom. I'm not sure why it matters other than you would get oil in there potentially, but everybody says it seems to be general consensus that it goes in the vent hole, so that's what I did. So I have replaced the lower drain plug with the gasket and installed this up here with some O-rings in here to make a good seal, hopefully. So the next plan here is going to be, let me go get my air tank, bring it in so I can hook it up. And the pressure I mentioned before I think was actually a little low. It seems like the general kind of consensus based on a Mercruiser manual I've seen online was 7 to 10 psi. Some people say they go up to 15. That seems to be on the high side of what I've seen, so I'm going to shoot for 10. That seems like that will be enough to verify anything, and that's what I saw in a actual specific Mercruiser kind of service bulletin or training manual. I forget what it was, but so I'm going to go with 10. Let me go get my air tank, hook it up, and guess check for leaks. I'm a little nervous. Hopefully this thing doesn't leak. That would be more work than I planned on putting into this thing, but yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Seals aren't that bad. As long as you don't get into the bearings and gears and having to disassemble all that, that's when it gets into a little bit more expensive stuff. So let me go get that air tank and we'll be right back. Alright, pressure tank down here. Let me show you the setup. So I got my portable air tank, pressurized to 25 pounds ish. Got my hose going, so there's actually a valve here, so I'll use that to control how much air goes in, running through flexible air line up to my pressure fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of slowly open this valve while watching this pressure gauge, and once I get it up to 10 pounds, close that valve and take this air line out of here, which will seal this off, and then see how it goes. Let me set up the camera and we'll do that. Alright, moment of truth. It's good. Here we go. It's 5 pounds right there. It's right on 10. Airline's disconnected, so right now we're basically sealed off with the fitting here. Oh, there's my finger. So I mean, at least at this point it's not dropping rapidly, which is a good sign, so I guess the proof will be in the waiting. We'll let this go for probably overnight, even though the one manual I said or saw said like 5 or 10 minutes, but it's not gonna hurt to let it sit longer. So knock on wood that's gonna hold. Now what it would mean if it didn't is you're gonna be replacing seals. There's a few seals inside this. The main ones you're gonna want to look for are the input shaft back behind here, which you need a special spanner wrench to get this off and get out. It's kind of a pain. And this, again, if seals go bad or anything else inside of here, you start getting into some specialty tools which cost some money. So you got a seal back there. You have another seal right here at the prop shaft. And you also have a seal around the shifter. So just because I'm holding pressure right now doesn't mean I'm necessarily good. So what you need to do, still look good there, while I'm sitting here waiting, other than just letting it sit overnight, one thing I want to do is take the input shaft and actually spin it by hand to make sure that there's no kind of weird cuts or tears in the seals that would seal at one point and then leak at another. You're just kind of double checking everything. And also you want to take the shift shaft and rotate it back and forth, basically for the same reason. The reason that you might run into an issue there is if one of these, like if this was bent per se, it might be sealing in this position, but if you rotate it and it kind of cams over, you may lose that seal. So again, you're just kind of double checking everything. So I'm going to do that here and keep an eye on the gauge. Set my camera up over so you can watch. You don't need to watch the gauge while you do this. this, you basically just need to make sure it didn't change when you're done. And while you're turning the input shaft, if you're in gear, you'll notice that the output shaft is actually spinning. So right now the Outdrive is in forward. So I'm also spinning the prop shaft, which is also testing that seal back there. So that should be good on that. No pressure change, which is a good sign. Let's try and spin this shift shaft, which you kind of need two hands to do to get it sometimes to click into gear. And just to verify it's in gear, just take a look at the prop shaft while you're spinning the input, and it'll be spinning the opposite direction, which it is. So we're in good shape here. Yeah, back and forward now, spinning the opposite direction. Okay, I've run it through its paces. Still at 10 psi, it's a good sign. Alright, so, I mean, in a nutshell, that is how you pressure test your Outdrive. Bravo's basically the same procedure. I believe that the Alpha 1 Gen 2s and the Bravos need to be tested off of the boat. Not 100% sure why. It may have something to do with the fact that they have a reservoir in the boat which has a line that goes up to it, and maybe you have to, maybe it's so that doesn't leak, I don't know. But I mean, everybody should really be taking their Outdrive off at least every fall anyway, just to kind of give it a good greasing and inspection and kind of glance over. Then every few years you should be replacing the impeller. So it's a yearly thing. So I mean, this may not hurt now that I have this fitting. This may be something I do as part of my kind of fall maintenance. Once I'm done boating for the season, when I winterize, I can do all my winterization stuff that I showed in my other video on the motor, and then maybe once the Outdrive's off, I'll do this as part of it. I mean, it's not going to hurt. Because I'll tell you what, there's one way for a drive to go bad quick, and it is bad seals. You let water in there or the oil out, and this thing just disintegrates. So they don't last forever, but it looks like I'm going to be good on this one. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope this helps. This seems to be one of those questions that I found a lot on the forums that people really wanted to know how to do. There's a lot of info out there kind of in text form on the procedure, but I thought this might be good to kind of make a video here. And again, this is going to be part one of a, I don't know, I documented it, I think, somewhere on how many parts this is going to end up being. But so this is part one, drain the oil pressure test. If we're good here, which it looks like we are, I'll verify, but if we're good here, next thing I'm going to move on to is the U-joints. Just got those in the mail. I rented the U-joint press kit from the auto parts store. We're going to get those swapped out. Next will be the impeller. And probably the final thing will be, I'm probably going to rebuild the trim rams. Reseal, sorry. Which I did on my last boat. It's actually a pretty easy job. Just kind of confused. That's one thing there's really no info out there on. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, guys, and I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, follow me on Instagram, Mad Props for Real. I don't know, all that other good stuff. So we'll catch you on the next one, guys. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.